Elena Vance, 31 years old, entered her sister's engagement party with the feeling that she had been brought somewhere she did not belong. Chloe grabbed her by the wrist, pulled her across the Boston Gallery, and smiled at a group of guests raising their glasses. "This is Elena, my younger sister. She spends most of her time crawling through basements and picking up broken bricks." Several people laughed. Their mother ran her fingers over her pearl necklace and added, "She has always been a little strange. We never expected her to accomplish anything important." Elena said nothing. She tightened her grip around her glass and watched the liquid tremble with every breath she forced herself to suppress. But across the gallery, Marcus Sterling had stopped speaking. His eyes settled on her face. Then he walked toward her. "Elena Vance, correct? I have finally found you." Those words made Chloe spin around. Marcus Sterling stopped in front of Elena as music and overlapping conversations filled the gallery. He did not look at Chloe. He did not look at her parents. His attention remained fixed on the woman in the gray suit standing beside the cracked wall. "Could you spare me a few minutes?" Chloe immediately stepped between them. "Mr. Sterling, Elena is not used to conversations like this. She only does minor technical work. Should you need any advice about design, I would be happy to help." Marcus turned toward her with a stare so cold that the smile froze on Chloe's lips. "I was not asking you." Julian, who was standing nearby, also went still. He had never seen his father dismiss a guest in the middle of a party, and he had certainly never seen him approach someone whose own family had pushed her toward the last table only minutes earlier. Marcus led Elena into the private reception room behind the gallery. The door closed behind them, shutting out the music and the hollow congratulations outside. The room was smaller than Elena had expected. There was no stage and no camera, only a long wooden table, 2 leather chairs, and several rolled blueprints in the corner. Marcus did not sit down. He went straight to the briefcase on the table and removed a folder with worn edges. Elena recognized it before he opened the first page. The Ironworks report. Marcus studied her for a long moment. "So you remember?" Elena did not answer immediately. 2 years earlier, she had been a young specialist working at a small surveying office on the 3rd floor of an aging building. The salary was low. The position carried no prestige. No one in her family knew exactly what she did, and no one had ever bothered to ask. At the time, the Ironworks project was being promoted as the largest redevelopment deal outside Boston. An abandoned industrial district was going to be transformed into a complex of apartments, offices, and shopping centers. The Sterling Corporation was preparing to acquire the entire development. Elena had been assigned to inspect a secondary foundation section. The job was supposed to take only 2 days, but on the first night, she discovered that the numbers did not match. The plans specified one type of steel, the structure used another. The records claimed that the ground had been reinforced. Core samples showed that several areas were still hollow and filled with water. Elena crawled through tunnels so low that her knees began to bleed. She used a flashlight to inspect every connection, measured every area of settlement again, and took hundreds of photographs. The more she examined, the more clearly she saw a system of fraud that had been deliberately concealed. The contractor had reduced the amount of structural steel. The concrete failed to meet safety standards. The geological reports had been altered. Should Sterling complete the acquisition, the corporation would own a structure that could begin cracking as soon as it entered operation. The damage would not be limited to money. Thousands of people could be placed in danger. Elena reported everything to her supervisor. He told her to change her conclusion. She refused. 3 days later, the file was locked. Her name was removed from the project. Her manager warned her that should she continue causing trouble, she would never work in the industry again. That night, Elena sat alone in her rented apartment, staring at the 80-page report. She knew that sending it could cost her job, but remaining silent would be worse. She copied all the evidence, removed her name from the cover, and sent the report through the Sterling Corporation's internal mailbox. Marcus turned to the final page. "Because of this report, we stopped the acquisition before signing the agreement. We avoided losing hundreds of millions of dollars. More importantly, we prevented a disaster that could have killed people." Elena looked down at her hands. "I only did what needed to be done." "No." Marcus said. "You did what dozens of other people were too afraid to do." He pointed to the structural sketches in the file. "For 2 years, my investigative team searched for the person who wrote these notes. Every trace had been erased. Then last month, a former engineer finally admitted that the report had been prepared by Elena Vance." Outside the door, Chloe stood motionless. She had followed them and heard nearly the entire conversation. All the color drained from her face. Marcus lowered his voice. "I want to thank you in front of everyone." Elena looked through the frosted glass in the door. She saw the shadow of her mother pacing back and forth. She saw her father forcing smiles for the guests. She saw Chloe standing perfectly still just outside. For years, they had told her story for her. They had described her as small, ordinary, and unworthy of attention. Elena slowly drew in a breath. Then she nodded. "All right, let them hear the truth." The party was being held inside an old warehouse that had recently been converted into a luxurious exhibition space. Black steel columns rose toward the high ceiling. Crystal chandeliers hung between ancient wooden beams, while the brick walls had been covered with so much white paint that nearly every trace of their age had disappeared. Chloe had overseen the design, and she made sure to remind everyone of that fact. Elena's name did not appear on the seating chart. A staff member had to write it by hand on a card placed at the table in the farthest corner of the gallery, beside the restroom, where she would sit with the temporary service workers. Her mother looked at her gray suit and frowned. "At least you look presentable today. But do not stand near Chloe when the reporters take photographs. The color of your outfit will make the pictures look dull." Her father leaned close to her ear, the smell of wine thick on his breath. "There are major developers here tonight. Do not start talking about foundations, decaying concrete, or cracked walls. Nobody cares." Elena was used to it. In her family's eyes, she did not preserve history or prevent old buildings from becoming deadly hazards. She was simply someone who wore clothes covered in dust, crawled into dark spaces, and returned home with mud on her shoes. But only a few minutes after entering the gallery, she realized that something was wrong. A thin crack ran along the base of the western wall. It had been covered with fresh paint, but the fracture was still visible beneath the lights. Elena put down her glass, stepped closer, and touched the surface with her fingertips. Beneath the paint, the mortar had already separated from the brickwork. She looked upward. One of the steel beams was sagging slightly. The lights above it trembled unevenly even though the air conditioning had been turned off. In the corner, another crack spread across the wall like a spiderweb. The structural load was being transferred to the wrong place. Elena's stomach tightened. "Chloe, you need to have someone inspect this wall immediately." Chloe continued smiling at the guests, but her hand instantly tightened around her sister's elbow. "Not now. This could be a structural problem." The smile vanished from Chloe's eyes. "Are you trying to ruin my evening? Should I be right, this room is not safe." Chloe pulled her behind a partition, her fingernails pressing through the fabric of Elena's sleeve. "Listen carefully. Today is about me. You are not going to turn it into some performance just to make everyone pay attention to you. Keep your mouth shut and return to your table." Elena looked at her sister. She saw fear hiding beneath Chloe's anger. Chloe had not been surprised by the warning. She already knew. Across the gallery, Marcus Sterling continued watching them. He could not hear the conversation, but he saw Chloe release Elena's elbow. He saw the color change in her face. And he realized that the woman he had spent 2 years searching for was standing inside a building that might become a disaster. He set down his glass. Then he walked toward Elena. When Marcus Sterling returned to the main gallery with Elena, the orchestra was still playing, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations gradually faded as the guests realized that the most powerful man in the room was no longer standing beside his son or his future daughter-in-law. He was walking next to the woman in the gray suit whom the Vance family had tried to hide at the last table. Marcus stepped onto the stage and raised one hand. "May I have everyone's attention for a few minutes?" The music stopped. Chloe immediately adjusted her dress and pulled Julian toward the front. Her mother smiled brightly, while her father quickly set down his glass. All three of them believed Marcus was about to announce a major project for the young couple. Chloe took Julian's hand. "I told you, he must have a surprise for us." Julian did not answer. He was looking at Elena. Marcus opened the worn folder on the podium. 2 years ago, the Sterling Corporation nearly signed a deal that could have destroyed the reputation my family spent decades building. The room fell silent. A redevelopment project had been stripped from the inside, structural steel had been reduced, substandard concrete had been used, geological records had been falsified. Had that project entered operation, the consequences could not have been measured in money alone. Marcus paused. His eyes moved across the tense faces in the room. One person discovered everything. He turned toward Elena. Someone without an important title. Someone without power. Someone whose name did not even appear in the final records. Yet she produced an assessment accurate down to every load-bearing point and sent it to us, knowing that doing so could end her career. Elena's mother pressed a hand against her chest. She was beginning to understand what was happening, but it was already too late. Marcus spoke each word clearly. Elena Vance, on behalf of the entire Sterling Corporation, I thank you. Whispers spread across the gallery. Several guests turned fully toward Elena. A reporter raised a camera. Her father stood frozen. Chloe was no longer smiling. Marcus stepped down from the stage and bowed his head to Elena. You saved us from losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and you may have saved many lives. Elena's mother immediately hurried onto the stage. Yes, of course. Our Elena has always preferred helping from behind the scenes. Our family taught both of our daughters to be responsible and to devote themselves to others. Elena looked at her mother. For a moment, she saw herself years earlier, standing in the kitchen while her mother told guests that Chloe was the family's only true source of pride. But this time, Elena did not lower her head. She stepped toward the microphone. No, Mother. Mrs. Vance's smile stiffened. Elena, this is not the time to become emotional. You never taught me that, Elena said. Tonight, you told me not to stand near Chloe because you were afraid I would ruin the photographs. Father told me not to speak about my work because no one cared, and my name was handwritten on a place card at the table beside the restroom. No one in the gallery moved. Her father stepped forward, his voice low but threatening. Elena, what do you think you are doing? We are family. Elena looked directly at him. Family is supposed to support one another. It is not supposed to crush one person's self-respect so someone else can wear it like a crown. The words fell like a hammer. Chloe rushed forward. That is enough. I do not know what you told Mr. Sterling, but do not turn my engagement party into a story about how sorry everyone should feel for you. Julian pulled his hand away from hers. Chloe, what do you know about the Ironworks project? She froze. I do not know what you are talking about. Marcus closed the folder. The subcontractor behind the fraud was a shell company. The person who introduced that company to the project received a percentage from every approved contract. Julian turned toward his father. Who introduced them? Marcus kept his eyes on Chloe. Chloe Vance. The room erupted with whispers. Chloe shook her head repeatedly. No, I only passed along a business card. I was not involved in anything. Marcus placed a printed copy of an email on the table. We have the correspondence, the consulting invoices, and the account that received the payments. You did not simply introduce them. You also instructed the design team to ignore technical warnings so the project could remain on schedule. Julian looked at the woman he had planned to marry as though he were seeing her for the first time. You knew there were problems with the building? Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Julian removed the ring from her finger, placed it on the table, and stepped back. One step, only one step. But to Chloe, that distance felt as though her entire world had just collapsed. Elena stood in the middle of the room without smiling. She felt no joy in watching her sister fall. This was simply the moment when the truth finally became heavy enough to break through the polished surface her family had maintained for years. Behind them, a sharp cracking sound came from the western wall. Elena spun around. The crack was widening. The fracture in the western wall released another sharp snap. Elena did not wait for anyone else to understand what was happening. Everyone, leave the gallery immediately. Her voice cut through the room. Marcus instantly signaled the security team to open every emergency exit. A few guests remained still in confusion, but when plaster dust began falling from behind the white paint, the crowd quickly rushed outside. Chloe remained beside the stage, her face drained of color. That is impossible. This building was inspected. Elena turned to her sister. By whom? Chloe did not answer. 10 minutes after the last guest left the building, a large section of plaster broke away from the wall and crashed into the exact area where the reporters had been standing. No one was injured, but the impact ended every remaining excuse. Marcus studied the fresh paint covering the decayed bricks, then turned to Elena. You saved this room for the second time tonight. Elena did not feel victorious. She only felt exhausted. For years, she had spoken inside rooms where no one wanted to listen. Tonight, the truth had finally been acknowledged, but only after the wall had nearly collapsed. The following morning, Marcus invited her to the Sterling Corporation's offices. A contract lay on his desk, offering enough authority and compensation to make any expert in the industry hesitate before refusing it. Marcus asked Elena to lead the corporation's risk assessment and historic restoration division. Elena read every page, then closed the folder. I am deeply grateful. But I do not want to spend the rest of my life being known as the woman a powerful corporation discovered. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. Then what do you want? I want to build something that belongs to me. Elena proposed creating an independent architectural restoration consulting firm. Sterling could become her first client, but it would not become her employer. Marcus remained silent for several seconds, then smiled. That is the answer I was hoping to hear. A new contract was prepared that same morning. Elena's first project would be assessing every historic property the Sterling Corporation planned to restore in Boston. By the time she left the building, her phone showed dozens of missed calls. Her mother called again just as Elena stepped onto the sidewalk. You need to tell the press that last night was only a misunderstanding. Chloe is falling apart. People at my club have already started asking questions. Elena stood still while pedestrians moved around her. Are you worried about Chloe, or are you worried about what people will think of you? Silence came from the other end. Her mother began to cry. She said that every family made mistakes, and that Elena should not destroy their relationship because of a few things said during one evening. Elena slowly closed her eyes. Those were not just a few words. That was how you treated me my entire life. You can tell your friends whatever story about a misunderstanding makes you feel better, but do not pretend you ever stood beside me. She ended the call. Her father did not call. He sent a long message. For the first time, he admitted that he had remained silent because he was a coward. He knew Chloe was selfish. He knew Elena's mother had always favored her. But he chose not to interfere because speaking against them would have made his own life uncomfortable. Elena read the message twice. She did not delete it. She did not answer it either. Some apologies must be proven over time, not written in a message after everything has already fallen apart. Chloe's engagement was called off. Julian moved out of their shared apartment that same week. Financial records were reopened for investigation, while companies that had once worked with Chloe began removing her name from their projects. The woman who had once been praised as the pride of the family now had to confront everything she had hidden behind beautiful walls. Several months later, Elena stood in front of an old brick factory undergoing restoration. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm golden glow across the stained walls. Workers carefully reinforced each brick instead of covering the cracks with another coat of paint. Elena placed her hand against the wall. People often believe stone remains silent because it has nothing to say. But stone remembers every weight ever placed upon it. Stone endures. Stone holds an entire structure upright. And when the foundation finally speaks, no polished surface can hide the truth. Should your own family ever make you feel insignificant, remember that your value does not come from the way they introduce you to other people. It comes from everything you quietly built while no one believed in you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive Elena's family, or would you choose to move forward as she did? Like this video and subscribe to the channel to join us for more stories about justice, self-respect, and the strength to rise again after being hurt.